Hi, welcome to my channel and my very first video. And you know what? You look like a baddie who enjoys social justice, politics, history, and just interesting topics in general. Just two smart and empathetic hotties staring at each other. If you are anything like me, you are just trying to keep up with the constant stream of bad news that we're getting in the United States every single day. And you're hearing the words thrown around like authoritarianism, fascism, totalitarianism.
That's a big word for Elmo.
And since we're just trying to keep up with current events, there is a lot going on. You haven't had the time to deep dive to build a foundational knowledge of all these isms, I guess. So that is what we're doing here today. I want us all to be knowledgeable on these topics so that we can recognize when authoritarianism is knocking at our door, and so you can successfully argue with your weird uncle and with strangers on the internet. Let's get into it. So, we're going to get started with authoritarianism, and I'm going to read you the exact definition. Authoritarianism is a political system that suppresses political freedoms, rejects political plurality and civil rights, the use of strong central power to preserve the political status quo, reductions in democracy, separation of powers, civil liberties, and the rule of law. Essentially, they use various levers of control to shift power from the people into the hands of one ruler or set of rulers. Just for a little bit of background and just a fun fact in general, the word authoritarianism didn't quite exist yet, but the concept of a single ruler stemmed back to ancient Rome, of course, with Titus Larsius being cited as the first dictator in 501 BC, and Julius Caesar became a dictator for life in 44 BC. And we all know what happened to him.
We should totally just stab Caesar!
Okay, so now we're going to dive into the characteristics of authoritarianism, and I promise this is going to be really digestible and fun. But before we get into that, I do want to mention that a modern strategy that dictators use is called the salami tactic. And it unfortunately is not good and delicious like the salami that you eat. And this includes tactics where it may not seem immediately obvious that a country is under authoritarian rule, but it's just a slow, gradual erosion of accountability, democratic processes, and civil rights. So, first characteristic is politicizing independent institutions. For literal decades, Congress has used their legislative power to create these independent agencies that operate free from any president's power and control. And I'm sure you're familiar with some of these institutions like the Federal Trade Commission, the Federal Election Commission, the CIA, the Environmental Protection Agency. There's a ton more. And these agencies were specifically designed to be shielded from political influence or personal gain so they can focus on the long term benefit of the public. And the people that lead these departments are supposed to be civil servants that are protected by long standing safeguards that protect them from political pressure. Now, we're going to play a game that you didn't realize that you were getting into, and it's called, um, what should I call it? Is the president of the United States an authoritarian?
Clap, clap, clap.
Winner gets a revolution. So essentially, after we talk about each characteristic of authoritarianism, I'm just going to state some facts about Trump and some of his actions, and we'll decide if he's an authoritarian. Donald Trump has taken many unprecedented, which can I just say, I'm so fucking sick of that word. I would love to live in precedented times. Anyway, illegal, which crazy that a felon would be doing something illegal. Who would have thought? Okay, sorry, I swear I'll get this sentence out. Many illegal actions to politicize independent institutions, including firing many federal agency leaders. Remember the first couple of months of his second term, Doge? No. Anyway, as I was saying, Doge, which stood for Department of Government Efficiency and was led by the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, who is now worth over $500 billion, came in and cut departments and fired federal workers and fired leaders of these independent agencies, all under the guise of reducing federal abuse and waste. Which, mind you, the leaders of these independent institutions can only be removed due to misconduct. by law. These vacancies then were either filled with Trump loyalists or they've been left vacant. One example of this is the unlawful firing of FTC Commissioner Rebecca Slaughter. I'm sure the fact that she is a member of the Democratic Party had nothing to do with this, but she contested the legality of her dismissal. But the Supreme Court, which is full of Trump loyalists that he appointed in his first term, ruled that she may be temporarily removed from her position pending the resolution of her case. And her position remains vacant still today. So, politicizing independent institutions. Check. The next characteristic of authoritarianism is spreading misinformation. Do we even need to get into this? Obviously, all politicians lie at some point. I think it's a necessary qualification for the job, but authoritarian dictators spread misinformation ruthlessly like it's their only job. But it's not. They also have to illegally fire the FTC commissioner. Sorry. Anyway, this misinformation is typically spread through coordinated channels, networks, and ecosystems like Fox News. And these lies typically serve two purposes. One is crippling political opponents. And second, they are smokescreens. They're distractions that they can abuse power and avoid accountability because everyone's confused. If you would like to know how Donald Trump spreads misinformation, literally just listen to him for 2 seconds. And I'm not like being funny or cheeky here, no joke. Or open the Truth Social app. While there are thousands of examples over the past 10 years, I think the best example is the misinformation that was spread by Donald Trump in the aftermath of January 6th, 2021. According to citizensforethics.org, Donald Trump lied about the events of January 6th 175 times. And this data was collected in June of 2024, so I'm sure we're up to like 300 by now, at least. He said things like Nancy Pelosi was responsible for the security failures that day. She is a part of the opposing party. That it was orchestrated by the FBI and other members of the deep state. That the insurrectionists were not insurrectionists, they were peaceful protesters. And he wasn't an insurrectionist, but Joe Biden was. And of course, that January 6th would go down in history as the day that the government staged a riot to cover up the fact that they certified a fraudulent election. Mind you, he was still in charge of the government at that time. Oh, so it was a riot, not a peaceful protest? Got it. He's also intimidated major news outlets, defunded public media, and has made it increasingly difficult for journalists to report on his presidency. He's also removed and erased the facts of history regarding people of color, slavery, women, January 6th from museums and federal websites. Spreading misinformation. Check. Next up, we have expanding executive power. Authoritarians really can't succeed without the obedience of the institutions that are meant to provide checks and balances. Sometimes authoritarians will rewrite the rules to strengthen executive power, and or they will just fill these institutions with compliant allies. Or they may manipulate existing loopholes or just push the boundaries of existing laws. And authoritarians may justify the expansion of executive power and diminishing checks and balances with cults of personality. And they'll often position these checks and balances and these institutions and the people that are supposed to keep a president in check as obstacles to the collective desires of the general public. So, the politicizing of private institutions that we've already talked about is a great example of expanding executive power. Trump has also used the Department of Justice to seek investigations and prosecutions of his political opponents. The most recent example that I can think of is the Department of Defense calling for the investigation of Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, who has been a very open critic, to say the least, of Trump, simply because he posted a video telling veterans, as he is a veteran himself, that they have the right and they should refuse illegal orders after the bombing and the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president. He has also abused his presidential pardon powers by pardoning his allies, including violent criminals from January 6th. And something that I find really interesting is that the many January 6th insurrectionists who were pardoned have either been rearrested, they've died, or you cannot convince me otherwise that they aren't ICE agents. Okay, back to the expansion of executive power. Many judges have accused the Trump administration of defying court orders. They've also rebuked the administration's aggressive immigration tactics and the attempts to consolidate Americans' sensitive data. Expanding executive powers. Check. Next up, we have quashing dissent. Strong democracies have solid oppositions to keep things balanced, and also a free press that is there to ring alarm bells to notify the public when those in power are abusing their positions. Autocratic, which means a system of government that holds absolute centralized power by one individual or a small group of people with little to no political opposition. Autocratic regimes not only weaken freedom of speech, freedom of the press, but they also influence and intimidate public voices who may oppose them. Autocrats from across the world love to delegitimize news stations and critical news coverage by crying fake news.
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you stay categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir.
Welcome the fake news media, which is back there.
There's a piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news.
Immigration officials have labeled Alex
By the way, this is ABC fake news, this one.
These autocratic dictators love to target news entities and civil society and activists and religious leaders, really anyone who speaks out against them. And they will regularly face attacks, jail time, and worse. Now, in the United States, we have three branches of government that are designed to provide checks and balances to each other: legislative, executive, and judicial. Some mechanisms of this is congressional override, which allows Congress to pass legislation despite a presidential veto, judicial review and blocks, and also confirmation appointments. And the Trump administration is certainly trying to turn the United States into an autocracy. Every single branch of government is full of Trump loyalists that bend the knee to him all the time. They've provided him with immunity, which places a president above the law and has helped him to push his agenda, which is Project 2025. But I will also say that a lot of judges have blocked his unlawful actions as well. Trump really loves to quash dissent, which mirrors the actions of authoritarians that he has publicly praised. He praised the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel, which that really happened because of his pressure that he put on his loyalists at ABC and Paramount. Thankfully, that has since been rolled back due to public protest, pressure, and outcry. Oh, and just a reminder as to why Jimmy Kimmel was suspended in the first place. It's because he made a joke surrounding Charlie Kirk's assassination. It wasn't about Charlie Kirk's character or the assassination. He was poking fun at the president for seemingly not caring about Charlie Kirk's assassination during an interview just a couple of days after the assassination. Trump has also filed lawsuits against media outlets and broadcasters that he doesn't like, and he has threatened to revoke TV broadcasting licenses. And I would be remiss not to mention that all of the media outlets, news, social media, AI, everything that we use and consume every single day is owned by Trump's billionaire allies. Remember when several of them were basically sitting front row during the inauguration? Yeah. The Murdochs, the Ellisons, who own Oracle and just took over TikTok, by the way, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and the list goes on. They all greatly contributed to his campaign, and honestly, it seems like a really covert way to control the media and quash dissent. So something pretty major has happened since I filmed this, and I wanted to make sure I added it in. Two journalists, Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, were arrested for reporting on a protest happening at a church during service in St. Paul, Minnesota, as well as two activists, Traherne Jean Cruz and Jamal Lydell Lundy, were also arrested for their attendance of this protest. They were all taken into custody by federal agents from their homes in the middle of the night on January 29th. This comes just a week after three activists were arrested for attending the same protest, including Nakima Levy Armstrong. The White House posted a digitally altered image of her crying while being arrested. The reason they were protesting this church was because the pastor, David Easterwood, is a local ICE director. He spoke at a press conference with head of DHS Kristi Noem in October of 2025, where he expressed his pride for the work ICE was doing. Now, there is a federal law called the FACE Act that prohibits the use of force, threats, physical obstruction, or property damage to interfere with a person's ability to practice their religion or access a place of worship. But in November of 2025, Texas Republican congressional candidate and staunch bigot Valentina Gomez interrupted an LGBTQ friendly church service to tell them they were using Jesus' name in vain. Was she arrested? Nope. She mostly received support in her comment section on Instagram. I'm also pretty positive that Jesus would not be down with what ICE is doing. Shortly after the church protest in St. Paul, a magistrate judge rejected prosecutors' initial bid to charge Don Lemon and others, but the Trump administration tried again. Jane Kirtley, who is a media law and ethics professor at the University of Minnesota, said the federal laws used to justify these arrests were not intended to apply to reporters gathering news. And let's be clear here, the Trump administration arrested 2 Black independent journalists while refusing to hold an investigation into the deaths of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy, who were killed by ICE in Minneapolis. This is definitely incredibly concerning and, is a clear attack on the free press, which is a clear benchmark of authoritarianism. Quashing dissent. Check. Next up, we have scapegoating vulnerable communities. This is another one that I feel like is very obvious and we don't need to expand on, but we are going to. This one pisses me off the most, okay? So let's get started. Protecting marginalized groups based on race, gender, religion, sexuality, whatever the case may be, is a sign of a very strong democracy. And you know the part in Wicked, the story about authoritarianism, propaganda, and scapegoating, where the wizard says the best way to bring folks together is to give them a real good enemy. Authoritarians scapegoat the most vulnerable communities to deflect and distract. They need us all to look over there. Look over there! And blame immigrants and the trans community for all of our problems so that we don't notice the giant tax cuts they're giving billionaires or the fact that they haven't lived up to campaign promises. Scapegoating is also a strategy to solidify power. They use it as justification to violate human rights, weaken institutions, and eliminate political oppositions. When it comes to the Trump regime, where do we even start? This is very clearly their number one focus and tactic. They have a mean propaganda machine trying to convince us, and has successfully convinced some, that immigrants are un-American, dangerous criminals so that they can justify increasing the ICE budget to be as large or larger, actually, than some countries' military budget so that they can crack down on crime, which just means terrorizing, abusing, and killing people of color, documented or undocumented. And now, as we've seen, white people as well. It's all very much so rooted in white supremacy, and official social media pages of the White House and DHS constantly are sharing very blatant white supremacist propaganda to push their immigration agenda. And of course, you'll have people who say, but they're illegal. We got to get the criminal illegals out of the country. First of all, being undocumented in the United States of America is a misdemeanor.
Wow, cute face, but I meant to say civil offense here, not misdemeanor.
It's basically the same as getting a parking ticket. So that does not mean that this person deserves to be abused and terrorized. And once again, don't talk to me about criminals when you elected a felon. Also, there's this little thing called the Constitution, and the Fifth Amendment of that Constitution gives us all the right to due process, which is something that the Trump administration is not adhering to whatsoever. They're literally sending people to countries they've never been to without due process. And we've also seen the Trump administration and his cronies ruthlessly target the trans community. They spew hateful and incorrect rhetoric, while the MAGA ecosystem platforms transphobes like Riley Gaines. If you're not familiar with Riley Gaines, she built a career off of being transphobic because she tied in 5th place during a swimming competition with a trans woman. 5th place. So she wouldn't have won even if that trans woman wasn't competing, right? And it's all very clearly for the grift, because her initial response to tying in 5th place with a trans woman was not transphobic. But unfortunately, the MAGA ecosystem very much so is lucrative and relies on the platforming of these types of people who can consistently deliver their message. Trump also signed an executive order just a couple of weeks into his second term called Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports. Mind you, trans people are about 1% of the population, and the men and women sports thing is truly a non issue, but this rhetoric and these executive orders very much so affect the lives, the real lives and emotions and careers of trans people. And he also signed Executive Order 14183, which banned trans people from the military. So, hold on. So they're too strong to play in sports, but too weak to serve in the military. Got it. Makes sense. The MAGA ecosystem also pushes the lie that parents and teachers and doctors are transing kids. It's where the whole like protect the children came from, and also protect them from drag queens too, but not from guns. Not from guns or predators. Don't worry about that. It's just such an insane lie. If a minor ever is having gender dysphoria, any doctor, therapist, and good parent would go, okay, what name would you like to be called if you would like to change your name? What are the pronouns you would like to go by? What can we, do to make you feel more comfortable in the gender that you would like to be? Clothes, hair, makeup, anything like that. And in some cases, doctors will prescribe puberty blockers, which they don't cause any permanent changes or damages. Again, it's just it's just absolutely insane saying that doctors and parents are transing their kids or mutilating them by changing their gender, when in reality, trans people wait years to go through top and bottom surgery and save a ton of money. It is so expensive to go through those surgeries. Many families can like barely feed their family, let alone trans their kids. Like, oh my God. So, scapegoating vulnerable communities. Check. I'm not giving a thumbs up for that one. Okay, we just have a couple of characteristics left. We're almost done. Next up is corrupting elections. So I think it's fairly simple to assume why an authoritarian would corrupt elections, and it's because they're just so awful and wildly unpopular. That's the only way they can stay in power. And this has really been the most, let's say, inventive strategy of 21st century authoritarians. They keep up the facade that there are free and fair elections, but then they bend the rules against their opponents. A great example of this is Russia. So, according to their constitution, a president receives no more than 2 6-year terms based on a 2020 amendment. And would you look at that? One of the amendments included a reset clause which exempted Putin's previous terms. He is now on his 5th term as of 2024. Authoritarians obviously do this by extending their executive power and bending the rules to favor them. And they're able to corrupt elections by either installing loyalists as election officials, by putting pressure or intimidating otherwise independent officials, and as always, just manipulating electoral rules in their favor. So has Donald Trump and his cronies corrupted elections? I'm just going to say yes, because there's no way that that many TikTok psychics told me that Kamala Harris was going to win and she didn't win. I'm just saying. Just kidding. But Donald Trump quite literally did say that without Elon Musk's knowledge of the voting machines in Pennsylvania, he would not have won. And it is a midterm year, it's 2026, and there's a lot of just concerning things going on that we should be worried about. One of which is Attorney General Pam Bondi sending a letter to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. And this comes after the murders of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy by ICE agents. And she essentially says, we will get ICE out of Minnesota, which has been terrorizing citizens for weeks, if you hand over voter rolls. The FBI is also currently raiding Fulton County Elections and Operations Hub in Georgia to seize 2020 ballots. I didn't necessarily expect this to come up in almost every single characteristic, but it makes sense. January 6th, 2021 was an insurrection to try and take over the government to overturn election results. Oh, also, Trump 2028 merch. I also found this really amazing timeline about how the Trump administration is trying to affect elections and has affected elections, from the Brennan Center for Justice, and I will link it in the description below. I also just want to say that we cannot give up hope. We can't just assume that voting isn't going to matter any longer. We can be concerned, and we absolutely should be, but we must still exercise our right to vote. We can't just hand over a win by not voting. Like I said, it is a midterm year, and voting in every single election, even in your local elections that seem kind of irrelevant and you're like, what is this? What do these people do? It is so important because those policies that that person puts in place affects our lives. Primaries are coming up very quickly, and the dates vary depending on which state that you live in. So, I'm also going to put another website in my description that will help you determine when your primaries are based on where you live. All right, corrupting elections. Evidence is pretty strong, so I'm going to say check. Our last and final characteristic is stoking violence. So, normal democratic leaders will always condemn political violence, but authoritarians will either look the other way or they will intentionally inflame the political violence. And they do this because they are just sickos, quite frankly, but it also helps them to push their authoritarian agenda. Political violence can provide a cover for restrictions on civil liberties or the expansion of coercive security measures. They may also suppress voter turnout among their opposition while encouraging their supporters to go and vote. Stoking violence also helps authoritarians to quash dissent, and it just undermines norms and trust and democratic stability. And fun fact, actually not very fun at all, but right-wing domestic terrorism has been the United States' largest terrorist threat since the 1990s. Sorry, we have to bring this up again, but he has also said, or tweeted, I guess, things like, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, and that the 2A people could handle Hillary Clinton and warned of a bloodbath if he didn't win. In July of 2017, during a speech to law enforcement officers in Long Island, he prompted them to be rough with people that they're arresting. In the wake of the white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, Trump did not condemn violence, and he said that there were many sides to blame. In September of 2020, he was given an opportunity to condemn white supremacist violence. Do you remember what he said?
Give me a name. Give me a
White
name. Go ahead.
supremacists and
Who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys,
militia.
stand back and stand by.
No one in the Trump administration is condemning the violence that is happening, the killings of Americans in the streets. As a matter of fact, they're for it. They're cheering for it, and they're telling ICE agents that they have full federal immunity. And we see more threats, attacks, and abuse on marginalized groups because they feel emboldened by Trump's violence and hate. Stoking political violence. Check. Okay, thank you so much for playing Is the President an Authoritarian? Drum roll, please, for the results. Yes, Donald Trump is an authoritarian leader. Therefore, we are living under authoritarianism.
You have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
It's time to get dressed for the revolution. All jokes aside, obviously this is very serious and our country is in grave, grave danger. Again, remember the salami tactic that we talked about in the beginning of this video? It doesn't happen overnight, but there are a lot of warning signs. So we absolutely have to stand up and speak out as much as we can and donate to organizations or volunteer our time, vote in every single election against any politician who is a Trump loyalist and supports his agenda. And mutual aid is a huge way that we will all help each other get through these times. Look at Minnesota. They are doing amazing things together as a community to help those in need. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you feel just a tad bit smarter because I know that I do. And I would love you forever if you hit the subscribe button. I'm sorry that you had to win the Is the President of the United States an Authoritarian game. Really sucks. But we got this. We got this together. I'll be back soon for more politics, history, and just interesting topics. Bye.